Economy, Mr. Barr, our national debt is approaching $10 trillion. Our dollar is losing its value, and the middle class, as you well know, is struggling. What would you do to address this problem to reestablish a strong American economy?
Basically, at the root of virtually every one of our economic problems in this country lies the federal government. The government trying to artificially manipulate and control sectors of the economy. And what's happening right now with the housing crisis is we're fixing to do exactly the same thing again. This brings to mind the old definition of insanity given to us by Albert Einstein, and that is doing the same thing over and over again but hoping for a different result every time. The federal government and the Federal Reserve, our old friends of the Federal Reserve there, are now proposing to get the federal government, actually they are doing it through legislation that was just passed as housing bailout legislation, getting the federal government and the Federal Reserve involved in the mortgage business, deciding who can get a mortgage, how they can get a mortgage, and providing more rather than less government resources, that is taxpayer resources, to back risky mortgages. We're going to make the problem worse, not better. So the answer to the question, how do we resolve these economic problems that are facing America, is we begin by attacking the problem in the first place, and that is government intervention and government regulation, and start reducing that.
The events of 9/11 and the truthfulness of the government's investigation are leaving a lot of people asking questions. Just this week, former Governor Jesse Ventura was making the rounds asking a lot of questions. I would like to ask you your opinion. Is a new investigation with regards to 9/11 and World Trade Center 7 warranted?
I don't think it is at this point, but I would remain and commit myself as president to look at new evidence as it comes in, and if there in fact is evidence that there was something improper that was done, at that point I certainly would not be averse and would support an inquiry. I've not seen anything yet that rises to me to the level of expending taxpayer resources for an investigation. I don't think that responsibly we ought to utilize taxpayer resources unless there's a good reason for it, but I would remain open to see if there is such evidence that can be presented.
We have seen our federal government be completely incapable at even attempting to secure our southern border. I'd like to get your position on illegal immigration.
I am a very firm believer in lawful immigration into this country. I believe that we ought to have a very robust system of allowing people in here for lawful purposes, whether it's for educational purposes, work purposes, or family visitation or tourism. Immigration is a very important part of our nation's economic and social strength, but it has to be legal. I am absolutely opposed to this sort of warmed over, half-hearted measures to control illegal immigration by this administration and prior administrations. What we need to do is to demand three things of those people seeking to enter this country. First of all, the only way they are going to be allowed to come in is through a lawful border checkpoint. Secondly, they submit themselves to a basic background check so that we can reasonably assure ourselves that they do not pose a security threat to this country. And thirdly, that they submit themselves to a basic health check to reasonably assure ourselves that they do not pose a communicable disease threat to this country. Once those three criteria are met, they ought to be free to come into this country according to whatever the terms of the visa are in which they're entered. But they need to submit themselves to those visas. They need to abide by them. Those people that are in this country unlawfully, illegally, if they are found out, they will be deported and go way back to the end of the line and required to wait an additional period of time before being able to seek re-entry on lawful terms. One related question that I think needs to be addressed, and I would as president, is the so-called birthright citizenship. The 14th Amendment provides that anybody born in this country becomes automatically a U.S. citizen. I believe that reasonably should be read to imply that only those born in this country have parents who are in this country lawfully, not illegally. That's the way I would interpret it as president. That's the way it would be enforced if I were president. And if the courts fail to uphold that, then I would support a constitutional amendment to make that clear.
So we're hearing a lot of rhetoric in Washington about perhaps preemptively striking Iran, even using nuclear weapons against them. We're also hearing the same from both Senators Obama and McCain, obviously catering to the massive Israeli lobby. What is your position on Iran, sir?
It's not just our lobby, it's this whole neocon philosophy of spreading by force the U.S. view of the world. I am very much against it, both as a philosophical matter and for practical reasons. There is absolutely no reason to even be contemplating seriously taking military action against Iran at this point. It would be counterproductive. It would be terribly, terribly costly, both in human terms as well as economic terms. I lived in Iran, for example, when I was a teenager. I actually graduated from high school there. I lived in Iraq. I lived in Baghdad for 3 years when I was a kid in grade school. My dad was working over there. So I have some familiarity with that part of the world. I also have 2 degrees in international relations. There is a very strong reservoir of support and ties between the Iranian people and the U.S. We have over 1 million Iranian Americans in this country. There is absolutely no reason not to be able to actively seek a constructive relationship with the people of Iran. There are a number of ways that we can do that, both directly by initiating, beginning to once again initiate diplomatic ties, and also using the good offices of a number of our allies, such as European countries that have very active diplomatic and economic ties with Iran.
Well, in closing, I would like to thank you for joining us today, Mr. Barr, on The Real News, and I'd like to give you an opportunity again to tell us how we can get involved with your campaign and the Libertarian Party and anything else that you might want to add before we go.
Thank you, Karen and Brian, very much for being with you and your listeners. The campaign website is bobbar2008.com, bobbar2008.com. We, of course, have a very active Libertarian Party and Bob Barr effort in North Carolina. Barbara Howe is our state chair there. And anything that people would like to know about how to get active in North Carolina to help our effort or nationally, you just feel free to go to our website, bobbar2008.com.
We want to remind our listeners that Bob Barr will be on the North Carolina ballot. We checked. North Carolina is one of the hardest states to get on the ballot, but he will be on the ballot along with Obama and McCain. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you all again. We look forward to being with you again before the election in November.
We'll do that. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
We're going to go to a break. We'll come back with your phone calls in just a few. All right, we're back on The Real News. We're going to go to our phones. Our Statesville number is 704-873-1400. Our Davie County number is 336-499-0681. I'd like to get you fired up out there. Call in. Let's hear what you got to say. Our website's therealnewsradio.com. And again, you can email us at onair@therealnewsradio.com if you'd like to give us some suggestions or make some comments or have your email read on the air. Also, I'd like to invite everyone. We have a local issue. If anyone wants to comment on the death of Anthony Davidson, feel free to call in and voice your opinion. We'll be covering this story along in the future. I'd like to report that anthrax-laced letters that killed 5 people and severely rattled the nation after 9/11 have been part of an Army scientist's work plan to test his cure for the deadly toxins, officials said Friday. The brilliant but troubled scientist committed suicide this week before prosecutors could charge him with the murder, is what our news is telling us. The sudden naming of scientist Bruce Ivins as the top and perhaps only suspect in the anthrax attacks marks the latest bizarre